Hey friends, it is Wednesday and that makes it Ask a Flower Farmer. It is your friend in flowers, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and super thrilled to be inside in the air conditioning talking to you guys. It is a scorcher here in southeastern Virginia. We still have not really had a lot of great rain, hardly any rain at all actually for like 5 weeks. And so it's pretty warm. And so if you're new here, welcome. My little farm is located in southeastern Virginia. I'm about 40 minutes from the coast. I live on a peninsula. I'm near Virginia Beach in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I started flower farming back in 1998 in my little city flower farm, and it has just boomed into all kinds of fun stuff. And I love coming on here and answering y'all's questions, as you know, right? So the way this works is down below there's a bubble with a question mark, and that's where you post your questions. You can ask questions about anything related to growing cut flowers, seed starting, cool flowers, farm dogs, whatever you've got, bring it on, and I will do my best to try to answer that for you. And I do take the questions in the order that they are posted most often. And I already see we have some early birds, those people that I started telling people that get there early and post your question, because I never get to them all. And so friends, while we're waiting for that to get revved up, I just want to say, I don't know if you've noticed, if you're following me on social media, I recommend that you do, because I am posting a lot right now about cool flowers. And if you don't know about cool flowers, those are the cool season hardy annuals that many of us kind of struggle to grow because of their awkward planting time. But y'all, this is the cash crop of spring that is a low investment, high return opportunity. Anyway, I'm posting a lot about it. I have a new webinar, a free new webinar. It's called the 3 Foolproof Steps to Success with Cool Flowers. And those are 3 of the things that I see people struggling with the very, very most. So you can actually just comment the word cool here, and I'll DM you the link for you to grab that. You can request it. So while we're all hot and heavy, we ought to be thinking about spring and what is going on with that. And anyway, so, I see we have 12 questions. So I'm going to quickly say this. First off, y'all, how about it? We are just loaded up with flowers. I don't know if y'all grow the Pro Cut Peach. That's what this is. You can see it in the bucket. It is definitely a different shade. Totally love this. I sow sunflowers each week on the Sewing Circle, which is my club's weekly get-together, one of the get-togethers that we have. It happens at 2 o'clock on Wednesdays. So if you're one of my club members, there are some of the sunflowers that we have been starting together each week. This is a great sunflower for fall. They're all great, but this peach is just really beautiful. And I just couldn't resist showing y'all this. Look at that lianas. Field grown, y'all. You know I have no hoop or greenhouses, right? So everything I do is outside in a garden. And these are lianas is in fact a cool flower, cool season hardy annual. And we plant these in very early spring. Ours were planted like mid-February. We have excellent stem length. I believe this is Voyager. And look at those blooms, the ruffles. So pretty beautiful. I just couldn't resist showing that to you guys. And I'll give this one last plug, and then I'm going to get your questions. Our Friday show is all about showcasing our harvest, right? This week we're highlighting cosmos, and it's because cosmos are an excellent fall crop. They get triggered into blooming more when the days start to shorten, and we have a bunch of them to show you. I grow 14 different colors or varieties. You're going to want to too. So you'll see all of that, all the other flowers. We have tons of coxcomb and zinnias, of course. And so if you don't have my phone app, you can get it by commenting app here, APP. It's free. You just download it and join us. And it's a fun show, 12 noon Eastern time, and you can shop from it anytime. So let's see what questions we have here. Oh my, 22 questions. I am having the worst time starting Celosia plume from seed. I'm using soil blocks. Any insight tips you can share? So I totally understand. Celosias, all of them, plumes and the cressida, which is the coxcomb, All of them prefer to be surface sown, and that means that they're likely to dry out really quick. So we sow them on the surface, but we do it with a toothpick, so we are firmly seeding the seed, and that just means it gets good contact, right? Celosia really also, in addition to needing light, that's why you don't cover it, it needs some light to germinate. It also needs a lot of oxygen. And that's what surface sowing really does for them. So we surface sow, and you can either place it onto a seedling heat mat, and then we would lay wide weave burlap over top of it. We use wide weave burlap, which you can find that on my website if you need it. It's like $3 or something, because it's got big holes. So it retains moisture, but it still allows air to pass through it, which is what doesn't happen when you use plastic and domes, which it's just easier to encourage diseases to grow, like dampening off fungus and stuff on your whatever, not just soil blocks, any type of seed starting method. So we use burlap. We lay that on it. Then each morning I pull the burlap back and I water the blocks. Mist it perhaps if they're really getting dried out. But also, I also start celosias in a germination chamber, and that's like a steam bath for seedlings, and celosia really loves that. So it loves warm moisture, but it needs to be on the surface. So hope that helps you. Any tips for grasshopper control? Oh my gosh, grasshoppers. We don't usually get them till much later in the season. The Nala, N-O-L-O bait, which is one of those types of, I'm not sure if it's a BT, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but only creatures that eat that bait actually die, and that's a grasshopper bait. We can't get it in Virginia for whatever reason. It's got some effect on something. Anyway, I hear people have great control with that. Beyond that, there is no treatment that I am aware of other than having predator creatures. Of course, birds eat grasshoppers. You really want to target their larvae and the younger. But my big tip is we snip them with clippers. I mean, our grasshoppers are huge. And they can do a lot of damage. I mean, they can take down a whole crop of sunflowers in 2 days, right? Excuse me. So that's all I got for you. Snipping them, cutting as many as you can. I mean, every one that you prevent from reproducing for next year is, a feather in your cap. In zone 9B, what can I plant for the fall? Only my second year. So I'm assuming that means that you're asking what can bloom for fall. And we are still knee deep in starting tons of warm season tender annuals. Bobo and I just talked about that. That's what they'll be starting all day tomorrow. We are crossing our fingers. We're getting rain tomorrow. So the team is cutting today instead of tomorrow, and we're going to be warming, starting those warm season tender annuals. All the annual grasses. And friends, I want to just tell you this. On my website, thegardenersworkshop.com, go to the store. It has go to the website, shop. Then go to seeds. Then go to the whole category of the warm season seeds. I only sell the same seeds that I'm starting from. We don't save seed typically, but my seeds, it's the same stuff. So you can see all the grasses that I'm starting and so we're starting tons of grasses. Of course, you continue to start sunflowers weekly up until 60 days before your first fall frost, if you're growing pro cuts like I am. We have all the celosias that are just coming along that were started in the last couple of weeks. So in 9B, I would imagine that your frost date is, if it even exists, is much even later. So all those warm season seeds, typically, you can actually still get them started indoors to get them outside. Starting indoors grows them up quicker in my experience. And so, yeah, you can start all that stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Too many buttons, y'all. What's the latest soil recipe for seed starting mix? What's the latest? So we make soil blocking mix, and that recipe is always on our website. It hasn't changed in 30 years since, Elliot Coleman came up with that probably 50 years ago. And so it's always on our website if you go to free resources, and I think it's called All Things Soil Blocking or Soil Blocking Resources. There's a bunch of resources there, but one of them is the soil blocking recipe, so it's right on there. Your Lizzies were beautiful. Any tips on starting these from seeds indoors? Yeah, I'm going to give you the greatest tip anybody will ever give you on starting Lizzianthus from seed: buy plugs. Why do farmers, most 95% of commercial flower farmers buy plugs. And the reason is that Lizzianthus seed is so slow to sprout, germinate. It's not really so slow to sprout. I can get it to germinate in 7 days, but it is so slow to grow. When you receive a plug, if you ordered plugs, when you get them, including the soil part, they're only about this big, right? They're 12 to 16 weeks old, y'all. Do you know how many different ways you can kill a transplant in 12 to 16 weeks? On top of that, Lizzianthus is very sensitive to air temperatures. So if they go much above 70 degrees, then they're going to do later in life what's called rosetting. And that is Lizzianthus basically get grumpy and pout if they hit that higher temperature, and they will never shoot up stems to have blooms. It's the most discouraging thing. I've had this happen to me. The most discouraging thing ever. You'll grow it, the plants look great, they're gorgeous, you just can't believe it. You can't wait for those tall, beautiful stems to come, and guess what? They never come. And it was all because of what happened during that beginning of life. And that's why buying plugs from commercial plug growers ensure all of that success. I have never had anything rosette that I have bought from a plug grower. So Farmer Bailey is who many of us as small flower farmers buy from. His requirements are less, or you don't have to buy quite as many. So there you go. I have started them from seed multiple years. We used to sell the seed to Lizzie, but too many people can't have success. So this is one of those times where you say, all right, it is smarter for me to spend 60 or 70 bucks for a flat. You have to buy 3 flats. So for like $260, you'll get potentially 300 or 400 plants who you can share with other flower farmers around you, and you get plants. You don't struggle for 16 weeks and not have a good crop. I understand. I went down that road too, but that is not for the weak at heart. So does your newest book have info on fall planting? Thank you so much for asking that. So my new book is called The Cut Flower Handbook, and it is a cut flower handbook, literally. It includes 66 flowers, 41 of which are cool season hardy annuals. The other 25 are warm. The first 2 sections of the book, the first section of the book, I think it's called the Cutting Garden Concept. You'd think I remember that exactly, but I don't. The first section, y'all, explains how a cutting garden works and how to figure out when you plant warm season and cool season. Y'all, it's got the whole story in there. It has a place for you to write your dates in after I walk you through all of that. So it is all about teaching you how to not only grow cool season, but warm season, and how to succession plant to have both of them coming and going all the time, right? And that's the whole story. So yes, that was the long answer to your question. Can you plant snap groups 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the same time? Will they bloom at different times? For example, the Dragon series, plant in fall. So yes, that's a great question. So if you're not familiar, Snapdragons are one of those crops that sometimes you'll see the numbers following the different variety names. And that number indicates when they kind of bloom. So like Snapdragons group 1 are the earliest to bloom. Group 2, bloom next. Group 3, next, and next. The really big dividing line is between group 2 and group 3. Group 1 and 2 typically are triggered to bloom when the days are short, like in spring, right? And a lot of those 1s and 2s, people grow them in greenhouses over winter. And so they will go on to bloom because they are short day sensitive. They will bloom during short days. The group 3 and 4 bloom during longer days of summer. So to answer your question, I plant all of them in the fall at the same time, and then my bloom time is basically kind of slowly rolls out. So yes, they bloom. It's really pretty perfect because Chantilly, which I think is group 1, is the first one to bloom. For me in the field here in zone 8A, and our last frost date is mid-April, they'll oftentimes be starting to bloom at the end of March. And then we have new stuff coming on usually throughout May and the early June. So we get snaps for April, May, and part of June, or through June. So yeah, so that works. And I only fall plant snaps now. I could plant again in very early spring, but here's a twister. I would never plant group 1 and 2 in very early spring because guess what? Because they bloom earlier in the season, they don't really have time to grow up tall and long, right? So I would only plant those last 2 groups, but I have found my fall planted snaps outperform even the very early spring. So it's all about your preferred growing, what you're looking for, and how you're trying to do your bloom layout. All right. I left my snaps in the ground. Will they rebloom in fall? So that's a really great question. It totally depends on how healthy and great your plants were doing, what your conditions are like. It is August and July that usually ravage cool flowers, meaning all these cool season hardy annuals. They like it cool, y'all. What happens in July and August, if you have hot, humid summers like I do, they fall victim to disease. I mean, they get rust, they get all kinds of thrips, all kinds of problems. So they may live, but you may not want them to live, is what I'm getting to. So that's, just if you live in New England, for sure do it. But if you live in the South, probably not. I don't know that I would, because you'll introduce and invite different types of pests that you otherwise would not have an issue with. All right, let's see, where are we? My Madam Butterfly blooms are short and fragile. What could have caused this? Growing conditions. So Madam Butterfly is one of our favorite Snapdragons. It's a double ruffled bloom. And so yeah, just growing quality of the season. When did you plant them? When did you cut them? I mean, snaps should be cut before, just as the very bottom flower, the first flower, begins to open. We find them to be incredibly sturdy, particularly when they're growing in their preferred conditions, which is cool to cold. And so again, I'll say I have a brand new free webinar, and it's called the 3 Foolproof Steps to Success with Cool Flowers. And in that webinar, I talk about the 3 struggles that I see. I just hear from people over and over again. And friends, I am not surprised. It's so different growing in the cool to cold seasons than it is in the warm seasons. Everything about it. When you plant them, how you handle them, what kind of conditions you try to create in the garden. So that free webinar, you can just comment cool here, and that will DM the link for you to request the actual webinar. I've been having trouble planting my soil blocks. They get stuck together, and then I wind up pulling them apart, a lot of the soil, or they stick to the tray and are hard to pull apart. Any tips for planting them? So I don't know what your blocking mix is, but even so, if you leave growing plants in soil blocks longer than you're supposed to, which I definitely do that on a regular basis. If you really leave them for a long time, they will grow a mat of roots underneath, and literally pulling them apart doesn't quite do the job. I usually take either a steak knife or we use wooden plant markers like popsicle sticks. If it isn't too bad, literally, and just cut the blocks apart. But that's I wouldn't do that for a lot of them, you would try to plant before that actually happens. But I have found that if they're semi-moist, so I water in the morning, if I have those kinds of blocks, I let them dry out some. Like if we water at 6 a.m., I would probably plant them mid-morning or late morning and literally pick the whole cluster of 20 up and put them on my hand and literally break and pull them apart. And, you know, a lot can depend on how long they've been in there, what blocking mix you're using, and just the whole process. But when you plant them, I mean, we often sit on them a week longer than we should, and they're definitely growing into their neighbors, but they easily and quickly break apart. So yours must be pretty tangled up if that's happening, and if that's the case, just take a steak knife and cut them apart. Don't worry about cutting the roots. Just do it. Any solution for thrips on Snapdragons? What a great question. This is the time of the year when they show. So funny. It's like I used to suffer big time with thrips. And back when I was a young grower, I can remember my first time getting them. I had them on everything I owned, and I was freaking out. So first off, I'm sorry you have thrips. And thrips are an insect that is their number one cut flower grower enemy. And literally, you cannot have them today, and all of a sudden, boom, tomorrow, they seem like they're on everything. They literally ride in on a southern warm wind sometimes. Or if you live in rural areas where there's farmers with pastures and all that kind of stuff, all they have to do is mow a field, and that festers them up, and they don't really swarm, I don't think. I mean, I guess they fly. I never thought about that before. But that'll move them, and that's how I got them back, you know, and I'd rather have my thrips back. But now we have houses built over in that field that was owned by my neighbor. He would mow, and literally that would poof them up, and they'd all fly over here. So I tried all kinds of things, and there are definitely sprays, IPM, integrated pest management sprays. Those are very targeted treatments, but you have to know that even targeted treatments do kill beneficial insects. I didn't stop using that stuff because I knew that. I stopped using that stuff because with the big picture of me flower farming at the volume that I was, and back then I was a one-person show, I could not get rid of the thrips. I was not obviously effectively doing it well. I wasn't doing the whole picture. And I'll tell you what that pushed me into learning and doing what I do today. So I tried to treat for 1 to 2 years. I used a bottle of Conserve, which I think I paid $600 for that little bottle of stuff. You had to suit up to put it on. What flower farmer has time to do that in the middle of summer, right? I mean, I gave it my good Girl Scout try, but I still had thrips, and I just was about at the end of my rope. I'm about ready to pull my hair out. And then finally, and I think I write about this in Vegetables Love Flowers. That's my second book. And y'all, that's not a book about growing vegetables. It's about why vegetables benefit from having flowers in the vegetable patch. It's really about a 3-season cutting garden. And I would say Vegetables Love Flowers talks about my style and method of living with my garden more than any of my other books. And so in that book, I talk about that. I mean, I just could not deal with the insects. So I finally just threw up my hands. I was exhausted and just said, y'all duke it out, and whatever's left, I'll take. And so over a 2-year period, I watched my farm do what I say restored the natural order. It just came alive with pollinate. The pollinators are the obvious ones. You know, underneath that canopy of pollinators that we all see, you know, bees and butterflies and all that, is this army of beneficial insects. And those beneficial insects are kind of like Navy SEALs. You don't really see or hear about them very often, but they're the ones doing the really hard, good work. And those guys are out there the world was made perfectly, right? Everybody, when it's in its natural place, has a predator. And when you allow those predators to live in your garden, they really help with the war, and, you know, you just kind of let them go for it. And so I just let that happen. Yes, I still have low-level thrips and other pests, but guess what? It's controllable. You have to have some bad bugs for the good bugs to eat. And so I would say to you, that's the long answer to the short of restore natural order of my farm. not using any pesticides, and that includes organics. Organic pesticides kill beneficial insects. If it kills anything, it kills the good guys too. That's just what you have to know. If for sprays and those types of treatments, the only exception, and I'm not a insecticide or pesticide specialist, but BT, which is what we use, you can spray that on flowers, and then when the larva, which is a caterpillar, like gets on your broccoli and your cauliflower, they have to ingest the foliage to die. So that means you don't target. It's not just blanket killing everybody, as a moth just flew by, y'all. So that's my take on that. And it's true. You can, if you ever came here to an open farm, you'll see the real story here. We very rarely, if ever, irrigate, and we just don't use any pesticides, organic or otherwise. And we don't find it necessary. And, you know, what do I say? Our beautiful blooms are the testimony that it works, right? But you have to be patient. It takes about 2 years for that to happen, and you really have to step away from the trigger, as well as I talk about in Vegetables Love Flowers, that also meant giving up some flowers that in my farm were bug magnets. For thrips, Shasta daisies, and gladiolas. There's not enough money in the world to make me grow those flowers, because that's what was harboring the thrips on my farm. Eliminating them, and doing all these other things just really was a step for mankind. All right, how to treat powdery mildew. This will probably finish us off here. So first off, there's all different kinds of mildew on different species of flower, you know, zinnias, and I mean my saucer magnolia tree even gets it. You need to first have a diagnosis. Secondly, there are different types. And there are some people that treat them, but just like pesticides, I just don't do it. That's one of the biggest reasons. I mean, I'm going to guess that you're saying that about zinnias. I tell you, the other ones that get really bad mildew, and it'll take your crop down and you'll never get rid of it, is sunflowers. That's why you'll see there's mildew-resistant varieties. The Pro Cuts, we always use those when they're available. But that's why we succession plant. All zinnias get mildew. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Ultimately, they will. They are just the perfect, you know, it's like, yeah. So we don't treat. If it gets too out of control, we just mow that crop. We have more coming along. But there are definitely remedies out there. I mean, I would go to a university website, you know, one of the land grant schools that have big agriculture programs, and see what they say, because there's all kinds of mixtures. I hear all kinds of stories. When you are a production flower farm, you just don't have the manpower and the time to do that stuff. You just either stop growing zinnias, or you mow them down and have other crops coming along in other areas that you can refer back to. And I will say that being willing to ditch stuff, not looking back and just looking forward and saying, oh well, lost that, mow it and move on. That's probably the biggest step towards business success, particularly in farming. I am quick to mow a crop, y'all. I mean, if it's problematic, if it's buggy, if it's got a disease, or it is a nightmare to cut and we just didn't realize it when we went to grow it, what's the point in keeping it and torturing everybody, right? So friends, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to go ahead to my 2 o'clock sew-in circle with my club. If you didn't know that I have a private club, you can actually comment club here and they'll DM you the link, or you can always find it over on my website, thegardenersworkshop.com. Every month I drop a master class. Speaking of, the master class drops next week, and this month's master class is called Slow Flower Sales, talking about how in July everybody hits a wall, and I have ideas on how to prevent that, or how to address that, what to do. And there's a bee, there's a bumblebee flying around, sister, just to be aware, and he's over here on the sunflowers now. So I address some ideas of how to let that not happen to you next year, what to do with all the flowers, how to use them to build your business if you're not selling them this month, and just, you know, That's that masterclass. So once a month I drop a masterclass. I do a Q&A, and I answer all the questions, so there is no not getting to your question. And I do a private broadcast, as well as we have Sew-In Circle every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and that's sewing like in Sew and Seed, y'all. And we have an amazing community chat board where it's just like kind of like Facebook basically, but it's private. But it's not Facebook. It's inside of our app. So, friends, check it out. The club is the word you want to get to get that DM, and you can get the link to that. So I hope to see you Friday at the live shopping show at 12 noon Eastern Time inside my phone app. We'll be highlighting all the harvest as well as cosmos, which now is the time to plant them to have a bumper fall crop. And some of those colors for those are so amazing for fall, y'all. All right, friends, till we meet again. Ciao.